born and raised in Hawaii, and he can speak with an English accent.
That was my 10-cent British.
That was pretty good. That was pretty good. I was like, all of a sudden, an inspirational idea. We should have like an international day of speaking in an English accent.
I agree.
Shouldn't we? Just everybody. Just one day where we just all. Brilliant. All right. Our next author is Gary Reavis. Gary, where are you? Gary. Okay, I just want to... I'm excited about this one. I've already read your bio here. Gary is a pilot, inventor, and writer. The oldest of 3 boys. He grew up in the 40s and 50s. Back then, his primary source of entertainment was the radio or books, mostly comic books. So he had to use his imaginations to entertain himself. A stick became a gun or sword. An old trash can lid his shining shield. A tree or jungle gym or a fortress. That old orange crate, a fighter plane or race car. As the proud father of 5 and grandfather of 12, he has always enjoyed coming up with new ways to entertain children, and storytelling is one of them. As a Christian, he believes he can entertain young and old alike without inundating them with inappropriate topics and themes. His first book, The Telling, is an attempt to do just that. Ladies and gentlemen, Gary Reavis.
Hey, Dad. Woo!
Well, this is a new experience for me. I've spoken to a lot of different groups, mostly children. My book is slanted for 10-year-olds through 110, depends on how much of a child you are. As he said in my bio, I grew up in the 40s and 50s. Now, I know I don't look as old as I am, but I will be 75 this year. One of my daughter-in-laws.
All 3 of you.
I have 3 of them here tonight. Actually, it was because of my family that they encouraged me after I retired in 2006, and I'd been retired for a few years, that I should do something with stories that I had thought about. So I started trying to write. Well, I come from a technical background, and when I was in school, I wasn't interested in English or reading or writing, except for comic books. And when I tried to start writing, that was definitely a hurdle that I had to cross. So I got online. After all, I spent a career designing devices that you could get online with, because my career was in making microchips. So when I started writing, I read a few articles on how to do it. I took a little course, and they said make a notebook. So I did, and I made notes day after day everywhere we went. And 2 years later, I ended up with a manuscript, 88,000 words. I submitted it to Tape Publishing. I'm a little different than most of the folks here tonight because I have a traditional publisher. They said they would take about 4% of the books that were presented, and then they got back at me in 2 weeks and said they'd like to do my book because I was the only one that was writing in the genre. And so they said, we want to do it. I said, okay. Now what do we do? She said, well, we have a few things we'd like to change. Like the main character. And you got to take out a few words. I said, okay, what do we want? Well, the main character is a 26-year-old engineer, needs to be a 17-year-old high school student. Okay, I can do that. And by the way, take out 20,000 words. It took me 2 weeks, but I did it. And this is the book. Now, a little bit about traditional publishers. From the time, it's been 4 years now since I started writing. From the time I started writing to now, the industry has changed, as the writers in the audience can tell you. It is very, very difficult to get out and get book signings today at bookstores. You cannot do it unless you're well known. So if you're thinking about writing, I would highly suggest that you just do the work yourself and go independent. Because you're going to end up doing 99% of the work anyway. You're going to have to do venues like this, and you're going to have to beat the bush. But it pays off. I'm now working on the third in this series, and I got the first pass at the manuscript. But like Andy, is it? I'm sorry, I don't remember the last gentleman's name.
Brian.
Brian, like Brian said, you write one and then you look at it and say, well, I think maybe I should start over again. So that's where I am with the third. But the second one I'm pretty happy with. Anyway, my book is about little people. Now, I've always been fascinated with the stories of leprechauns, fairies, pixies, that type of thing. But coming from a scientific background, I spent 47 years in the scientific world, I kept thinking there's got to be a reason for these tales. Maybe there was small people once upon a time. Now, the smallest person I could find on the Guinness World Records is 20 inches. And when I started thinking about my characters, I wanted them not to be, what are they called, borrowers? Yeah, the little ones. I wanted them something that kids and people could relate to, and they could interact with normal-sized humans. So I made them 12 inches tall. Now, the main character in my book is now a 17-year-old high school student, and he finds out that his grandparents call him home from school and tell him it's his turn to take over the family secret, which is hiding these little people. They've been doing it for almost 100 years, and now it's his turn. His name is Connor. The little people call themselves Tinys, ergo Tennessee Tinys. Well, I was in Tennessee. I have a place in Tennessee, so I was in Tennessee writing, and Tennessee Tinys kind of flowed, so that's what the title I came up with. So he's been told that not only does he have to take over taking care of these tiny people, there's a whole race of them that live near his grandfather's house, and he has never ever seen one before until his grandfather introduces him. But the trouble that the Tinys get in, and the troubles that the teenagers get in, and there's always a bad guy. So there's a bad guy whose family have been looking for these Tinys for generations also. So that's the gist of the story. I wanted to have the interaction between the normal-sized humans and the tiny people to be on a normal basis. No magic, no spell casting, just what would happen if, like when I go to the schools, I ask the children, I said, now, if you found a group of tiny people in the woods, would you expose them to TV? Or would you try to hide them if that was their wish? And you get about 95%. You always have 3 or 4 wise guys that go, I'd tell the TV. So I started with the premise that they want to be hidden. Now, I don't have time to read a whole chapter, so I will read a little bit. I'll start out with the first part. 2 tiny brothers in the village near their grandfather's house. This chapter is titled The Storm. In the village of the Tinys, deep in the woods of Tennessee, 2 brothers have been arguing. It ended with one stomping out of the house. A short time later, through the bedroom window, Eric had seen his brother leaving the village earlier than usual. He noticed Brian was carrying a pack and his bow. Eric quickly dressed and was out of the house, trying to catch up. He headed in the direction he had seen him going and was not long before he spotted him. "Brian, wait up," Eric yelled as he ran to catch up. "What do you want?" his brother asked as he turned to face his older brother. "Why don't you just leave me alone?" "Hey, come on," said Eric as he reached Brian's side. "What's wrong? What are you doing? Where are you going?" "I just want to get away," Brian said huffily. "So just go back." "Not until I get some answers," exclaimed Eric. "Are you still upset about last night's meeting?" "Yeah, so," Brian says as he turned and heads deeper into the woods. "Look, Brian, you knew you weren't old enough when you asked. How do you expect them to react? You know the rules say you must be 16 to become a scout. It's only 7 months until your 16th birthday. That's not too long." "It's not only 7 months and you know it. The council only picks new scouts once a year. That means I have to wait a whole year, Eric." "A whole year? They could have let me start now. I can do everything a scout needs to do. I can hunt, fish, set traps, and scout. And I'm better with a bow than most. I can even hide and move in the forest better than you." "Hey, don't remind me. I don't want anyone to know my little brother is better than me in the woods," Eric says with a grin and a chuckle. "So, you finally admit it. I'm better than you," Brian says, not returning Eric's laughter. Again, Brian turns away and continues walking. "Brian, wait. Why are you leaving? You know you don't have to, Eric pleaded. Over his shoulder, Brian remarks, "I will live in the forest and you know I can." "Boy, what a stubborn kid," Eric says to himself and then yells to his brother, "Okay, but why don't you at least wait until after the storm?" Brian stopped short and turned to face his brother. "Storm?" he questions as he looks skyward. "Yes, storm," replied Eric. "You can read the skies as well as I can. You just forgot to look." "I don't care if a storm is coming. I'll just hold up in a tree." "A tree? Now that's a good idea," Eric said sarcastically. "Just a perfect place in the middle of a thunderstorm, you know, with lightning and all." "Ha! Got you again," says Brian, grinning. "I know lots of trees that have already been hit, so there, lightning doesn't strike twice." With that, he headed into the forest. Shaking his head, Eric started back to his house, knowing he had to go after Brian. He began to his mental checklist of the gear he needed. "It's going to be a long day," he said under his breath. It started to rain as he neared his house. "Eric!" He turned to see who was calling and found Dina, standing under the eaves of the house next door. He waved. She motioned for him to come to her. "Now what?" he mumbled to himself, knowing all along what she wanted. Dina had been following Brian around like a lost puppy since they were 5 years old. Everyone knew they were a couple. When he was close enough to hear her, Dina asked, "Where's he going?" She pointed in the direction Brian had gone. "Into the woods to pout," Eric replied. "There's a storm coming. Why is he going in the forest when in the storm? Why didn't you stop him?" By now he could see tears forming in her eyes. "He'll be okay," Eric said, trying to console her. "I'll try to stop him, but you know, he gets that. You know how he gets when he's upset. Don't worry, I'm going after him." Now, I don't know how my time is doing. Am I doing 1 minute? Okay. I'll make it a quick minute. They find him hiding in an old tree that had been struck by lightning before. It was damaged, and he had crawling into a hole in the tree where there was a squirrel's nest, and was hiding there, waiting out the storm. They climb up to meet him, and they get hit by a tornado. In the last sentence of that chapter, let me read that, and then I'll quit, and let the next person come. Come on, here it is. With a great tearing noise, the top of the old owl tree, including the part they were hiding in, was torn from the rest of the tree. Spinning and rising, they were lifted high into the air, and their world became a tumbling nightmare.